Welcome to this episode of Against the Mountains of Madness. I'm your host, Jason.
And I'm John C. Wright.
And on this episode, we're going to be discussing the problem of Piffle. But before we start...
Greetings, world. This is John C. Wright. I and my compatriot, Jason Rennie, take up arms weekly against the mountains of madness that are afflicting and overwhelming the modern age. You are welcome here among like-minded souls, and I hope we have provided a work of insight, hope, or humor, and perhaps an explanation of the insanity that is the modern age. For more content and conversation on these and other fascinating topics of philosophy, science fiction, and current events, please visit our Substack at atmom.substack.com. Tips, bribes, and generous patronage are warmly encouraged. Thank you.
The problem of Piffle, John.
The problem of Piffle is my special term I use for the problem that atheists have, which in my opinion is as great a problem for them as the problem of pain is for Christians. Christians should stand ready with some sort of answer for why a benevolent God would allow death and evil into the world. But I don't think it's a trivial problem. I think the Christian has to actually think about this carefully and be ready with an answer that's careful.
Yep.
But I think that if you're going to weigh how many problems your worldview contains, that the atheist worldview contains at least 8 or 9 more problems equally as grave and equally as hard to answer. And I have almost never met an atheist who is ready to answer or even address any of these problems. And I call it the problem of Piffle because if there's no God, then life is meaningless. Life is balderdash. Life is flim-flam. Life is piffle. Life doesn't mean anything. And philosophically, that breaks down into a number of areas, which we could go through one at a time if you like.
Sure. Now, before we start, we should note, you and I both used to be atheists.
Mm-hmm.
Neither of us have been atheists for a while. Wow. What I turned 48 the other day, and I abandoned atheism at about 18.
It's been a while.
It's been a while.
And you and I were not atheists of the same type. I was an atheist
No.
for entirely intellectual reasons, philosophical reasons. And you told me once that you were an atheist for what? Because you were angry teenager?
I was an angry teenager, but I would have said it was for entirely intellectual reasons, even though I was an idiot. But, I was a teenager. Teenagers are idiots. That's fair. We're all teenagers. They're all idiots.
That's why we've coined the term. That's why we coined the term sophomore and called certain arguments sophomoric.
Well, there you go.
But the atheist is in a position where he has to reject the wisdom of his elders and also reject the wisdom of tradition. Because he has to go against what everyone else in the world has always believed for all of time. Although, I gotta say that there are atheists that show up in ancient Greece and in Rome and in the Middle Ages and so on and so forth.
They've always been with us?
What's that? They've always been with us, yes.
They've
never been a major number. It was not until basically Karl Marx that atheism found a worldview that was appealing enough to appeal to a large number of people that they could be persuaded or cajoled or forced into, Now, not to say all atheists are communists. I'm just saying that, let's define our terms. An atheist is someone who, for whatever reason, doesn't believe in God. Usually people call themselves agnostic if they just mean they don't care about the issue. Now, we atheists, back when I was an atheist, regard those people as just being mealy-mouthed. We call them Laodiceans, and we spew them out of our mouths for being lukewarm. They're an agnostic. When I was an atheist, I would say an agnostic is someone who is an atheist but isn't willing to admit it. Because if you're not going to church and you're not worshiping God, you're acting as if God doesn't exist. An atheist is someone who will give a reason why he thinks God doesn't exist. And the arguments can be either complex or simple.
But we should note, in practice, most people that would use the word atheist to describe themselves usually believe other things as well. They're usually some variety of materialist.
But not always.
They usually believe, if they believe in a soul in some loose sense, they don't think it survives the death of the body and things like that. They don't believe in a life after death. They don't believe in. It's mostly that one. They don't believe in God. They don't believe in life after death. They usually believe aliens exist, but I don't think that's essential. I think that's just a modern Western science fiction atheist thing, I think. look how big the universe is. Aliens must exist somewhere in it. I mean, it's not an essential belief, but
we don't have
they
a
all seem
separate
to hold
word.
it.
We do not have a separate word for people who have faith that life exists on other planets, though we should. You don't have to be an atheist to think life exists on other planets.
No.
And you don't have to be a theist to believe it either. An atheist is someone who doesn't believe in God. Okay?
True.
Now,
But they
there are
usually
people
have
who...
this collection of other beliefs, that was all.
The other beliefs,
They
the
tend
other
to
beliefs
have
are
these other
the other beliefs can come and go, but the core atheist, I would say, is, let's say, someone who doesn't believe in the supernatural. Because I don't want to get into an argument with someone who believes, let's say, in reincarnation, who thinks that all things are God, but he doesn't believe in a God. That guy, I think, is religious.
Different.
It's a different religion from mine, but it's religious. But an atheist is irreligious. An atheist says, no worship, no prayers, no magic spells. Okay?
Yep.
So let's see what it...
I will agree with that. Yes.
So let me use, for this conversation, let me say the word atheist means does not believe in the supernatural. He thinks nature is all there is. Okay? So basically a materialist.
For an appropriate definition of nature, yes. They could believe in dualism and other things. I mean, like, that's fine. But... yeah, no God, no angels, and probably no life after death.
And no spirit, no soul. The brain is just a computer.
Well, they could believe in some sort of dualism, that the mind is not reducible to the brain. I don't think that's incompatible.
Nor do I, since I also used to believe that when I was an atheist. I used to believe that the mind was free. I was not a determinist, for example.
Oh no, but I mean the mind doesn't have to be reducible to the brain. That's okay. I agree. That's okay.
You can be an atheist and believe in free will. You can be an atheist without being a materialist, a strict materialist. Okay.
Yeah,
but I would say, for the purpose of this conversation, let's just agree that the word atheist means someone who doesn't believe in the supernatural.
Yep.
No gods, no fairies, no magic spells. Okay?
That'll work.
Now, the problem is that if you don't believe that there's anything outside of nature, the one thing that we notice about nature is that there's such a thing called entropy. We live in a world where things change and decay. Okay? We also live in a world that exists. So the first metaphysical question I have to ask the atheist the first problem, the problem of Piffle is, how do you explain this? How do you explain that the fact that the universe exists rather than doesn't exist? You can't say all of nature arose from nature, because nothing causes itself. If nature did not come from the supernatural, where did it come from? Now, the atheist can say several things in response. He could say nature has always existed.
The universe is eternal. Yeah.
Right, the universe is eternal. Now, the atheist is then in a bit of a difficulty because modern physics, the standard model of physics, doesn't agree with that. If the universe is eternal, then there can't be change and decay. There has to be, where does the energy come from to rewind the clock? You see?
They work pretty hard to escape that in some capacity. Something like, weirdly, Nietzsche's eternal recurrence with the collapse and re-explosion of the universe over and over.
The Stoics did the same thing, as do the Buddhists. So yes, there could be an eternal return, but why is the wheel of eternity there rather than not there? So he doesn't really answer the question of how it arose. Where does it come from? To say it's eternal is the same as to say it came from nowhere, it has no beginning. Which is the same as to say it's a god.
Well,
because it's a thing with no cause. It's an uncaused first cause in their philosophy then. They just call it the universe.
In their defense, there needs to be one of those things.
Sure, I believe there has to be an uncaused first cause in any system of logic.
There has to be one brute fact of existence.
Correct.
There's no. I mean, I don't think the universe is a good choice for that, but I mean, they ask the same question of why does God exist, and we would say God is self-existent in and of himself and eternal. I don't think it's a satisfying answer to try to attribute that to the universe, but I mean, you need to stop the recurrence somewhere. So I'll I don't think it works, but I don't think it's a completely terrible. I don't think it's a completely terrible answer. I think you have other problems, like entropy is an issue, things like that. But I mean, I think they would. I certainly would have said when I was an atheist that I probably would have said something like, "You have to stop somewhere," and I just stop one step sooner than you do. So, I don't know. How would you respond?
I agree. It's not a bad answer. The problem is that when a Christian or a Jew speaks of God, he speaks of something that is eternal, immovable, and simple, that is not subject to change and decay. The one thing that we notice about the universe, the most obvious fact, is that things do change and decay. The sun comes up, the sun comes down. People get old, people die, people get born. Chickens lay eggs, eggs hatch. Okay? Now, to say that's eternal is to say that there is some energy or power or something which makes those things recur again and again and again. Okay? Call it the laws of nature, if you like. Now, why the laws of nature should be eternal, why it's just a brute fact, that they don't have an answer to. But then again, we don't have an answer to the origin of God, because we say there is no origin. Okay? So, I think it is an answer. I think, like you said, I agree with you. It fits awkwardly into the material universe to be an eternal materialist. And it also simply says, well, let me tell you what I would have said when I was an atheist. I would have said, human reason can't answer that question. We don't know where the universe came from. Because we can only make judgments based on the evidence available to us. And evidence of an infinity of the past is not available because you can't look at anything infinite. It's just a brute fact. We don't know where it came from, but that doesn't mean there's a God. So I'd still be unconvinced as an atheist. Which is pretty much the same as your answer.
Yeah.
And you're right. Everyone has to start with existence exists. Everyone has to start with something that says I am who I am or is. Okay? The problem is that I am who I am, if it's a person, if it's a being, makes a lot more sense because then it can set other things in motion. Whereas if the world was always in motion, where did the first motion come from? Why is it going this way as opposed to that way? You see, the railroad train has no first car, has no engine driving it. So you have to ask why the railroad car is going 30 miles an hour and not 60 miles an hour. If you believe in an uncaused first cause, if you believe in a God, you can say, there was something that set this in motion and decided that it would go 30 miles an hour as opposed to 60 miles an hour. Otherwise, you either have an infinite railroad track with an infinite number of cars going into the past and future, or you have a Buddhist circular railroad track going around the equator of the world with just one railroad card tied to the beginning railroad card. And whenever you ask, why does car A move that fast? You say, well, car A-1 moves that fast. And then you go all the way around the world and you find out that car A moves at the speed it moves because it moves at the speed it moves.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it's not a very satisfying answer.
No, I agree. It's a problem.
It's a problem.
I don't think there's any avoiding it, but I think they probably would just ignore the question at the end of the day.
Well, let me tell you the worst answer, in my opinion. The worst answer is to say that something can arise from nothing. And there's many modern physicists who just say, well, the universe used to be nothing, but it was a very energetic nothing that exploded for no reason into the cosmos because cause and effect don't exist at the subatomic level. Okay, I wish I could give a stronger argument in their favor, but that's my understanding what the argument is. That there are certain times when, just out of statistical probability, events happen for no cause, for no reason.
I've encountered that sort of argument, and they always cheat with the definition of nothing to mean something.
Right.
They don't actually mean nothing. They never mean nothing when they say nothing.
Right.
They're cheating. They mean something. That we'll call nothing.
That's what they call nothing. An energetic nothing. Well, here's the problem. Here's the problem just logically. If you say that something can arise from nothing, that means anything can arise from anything. Because you're denying the fundamental principle of cause and effect. Okay? That means that anything, worlds, men, words, this sentence, can just appear out of nothing for no reason at any time. Well, if anything can appear out of nothing for no reason at any time, that includes both this concept we're discussing right now and the denial of this concept we're discussing right now. So the statement that events are causeless is a statement that invalidates itself. It's an uncaused statement. Even if it might have a cause in the immediate past, ultimately it has no cause because everything arose from nothing for no reason. Okay?
Yep.
So if the answer to the question is why is there something rather than nothing, everything arose out of nothing for no reason, that's no answer. That's not a satisfactory to the human reason to answer that question. An atheist is much better off to say either the universe is eternal, or the universe is circular and eternal return, like the Buddhist would answer, or to say, I don't know, human reason can't answer that question. It's a meaningless question today. Those are better answers than to say things happen for no reason. to abandon science in order to answer a metaphysical question is not a wise strategy. So,
Well,
but yes, go ahead.
I was going to say, do they have a lot of choice? Because, I mean, if you're trying to argue for your position and at the end, when asked questions, you eventually go, well, that doesn't count as a question because, you know, human reason can't deal with that. So it's just an it seems like a perfectly reasonable question. So to say human reason is incapable of answering this question, well, hang on, I have an answer. It seems quite answerable to me. So, you know.
Well, in all fairness to our friendly neighborhood atheists, and you said we were going to try to give it as strong an argument for their position. The atheist can say, let's suppose we were not talking about whether God exists. Let's suppose we were talking about whether or not life on other planets exists. Okay? The aplanetarian can say, the alifist can say, I don't see any evidence that life exists on other planets, not even a microbe. Therefore, I'm not convinced that life exists. And if you say an answer, well, how did life get onto this planet? If the guy then says, I don't know, science has not answered that question yet, I regard that as a legitimate answer because science actually does not know how life arose on this planet. We have a few theories, none of them are very good. So if I'm an atheist and I say, well, how did the universe arise? And he says, no one is in a position to examine the moment when the universe arose. There were no people around to see it. I mean, Confucius himself, Confucius the Chinese sage, says, no one saw the beginning of the universe because there's no one around. No one saw the beginning of everything because there's no one there. So no one can answer any questions about it. That seems to me to be a reasonable but unsatisfactory answer. Because even if you say nothing was around, I say you have to say some principle was there, some law of cause and effect was there, or some creator was there, or something which would make it happen. Something has to make it so it's possible for this to happen. Because it did happen. You say?
Yeah. No, I would note, though, I mean, that's not entire. I mean, you can say no one was there to observe it, but I mean, we have an entire discipline of science. We have an entire field of study that is committed to answering questions.
Sure.
From effects, extrapolating back to causes, or extrapolating back to what happened, based on observing the debris, like that's literally what the science of forensics attempts to do.
Certainly.
So,
but as your friendly neighborhood atheist, I would say, once you have deduced that the entire universe, all the mass energy of the universe, was concentrated in one subatomic point of time, space, matter, and energy, that was homogeneous, that the homogeneity of the effect would have destroyed any evidence we had of any previous condition. There may have been another universe before this universe, but the Big Bang erased all evidence. We could use the evidence. We can deduce the Big Bang exists, and we might be able to deduce very cleverly what the internal conditions might have been of the supersymmetries before the four fundamental forces of the universe evolved. But if there's any thumbprint there of any previous creator, it would have been blown up in this space explosion. I think it's perfectly legitimate for a scientist or an atheist to say no one knows what happens before that point in time, and for all we know, there might not be a before in the universe. It could be like saying what's more north than the North Pole. It could be the point at which time began. In which case, there's nothing before it.
So it's effectively an edge.
Yeah,
it's an edge you can't get beyond.
It's the edge you can't get beyond. It's the event horizon. Okay?
Yep.
Now, I myself think that is not a legitimate, rational answer to say, I don't have evidence, therefore I don't know. Because to me it looks really obvious that the answer is, if nature could not have produced that effect, then supernature did, because the effect did happen. So, process of elimination. It happened.
I agree.
Nature came into
agree.
existence. So there's something made it. So.
But I mean, you've moved from physics to metaphysics at that point, because
Yes.
they're effectively saying, I can't think of a physical explanation for how this happened, therefore we put it in the bucket.
No, they're saying something stronger. The friendly atheist is saying physics can't answer the question of where physics comes from, because the Big Bang erased all evidence of any previous condition. Even if there was a cause or not, is unknowable to us because of where we stand in the universe.
Oh yeah, no, but I mean, they're just effectively sort of. But that's effectively a philosophical position at that point.
But he's like the lifist, the a-lifist, who says, I don't know if there's life on a planet in circling Alpha Centauri. No one's been there. No one's seen it. We've seen no evidence of it. That seems to me to be a perfectly legitimate answer. Science doesn't have an answer to that. I don't know.
Okay. I guess.
But here's the trick. I think you're still right. I think he's trying to answer a metaphysical question by pretending it's a question of physics. Because my question is not what caused the Big Bang. My question is, why is there something rather than nothing? My question is not what law of nature operated to make a super space explosion at the beginning of the universe. My question is, why are the laws of nature supposed to not?
But their philosophical presupposition is there's nothing beyond the laws of nature. So
right.
They want to say, well, it was just a different law of nature operating, but we don't know what that is. But we have
something. They could say it's the same laws of nature. They could say the laws of nature operate continuously over all time.
Sure, but however they want to deal with it, but they want to say we have a philosophical position that the laws of nature writ large,
right? Because here's the real question. Here's the real question that they're trying to avoid, and that you and I are tiptoeing up to, which is why, Mr. Atheist, Mr. Friendly Atheist, do you believe that there are laws of nature, that they are consistent, and that they should be consistent across all time, and that nature will obey the laws of nature? In other words, why do you think the universe is reasonable? Why do you think the universe is something you can figure out? Does that make sense? Because we're really talking about the metaphysical question of whether or not the universe is understandable or not, whether or not the universe is rational or not.
It's interesting.
You see?
I agree. It's interesting in the history of philosophy that the Indians and the Chinese had different answers to the Westerners' answer to that question, because, I mean, the Western answer is yes, the universe makes sense and is comprehensible. If I understand correctly, the Chinese answer to the question was yes, the universe is regular, but we won't be able to understand it. And the Indian Eastern answer is sort of, well, it's not understandable. They do more with the mind, and they don't really, they think the material world, for certain subsets of Hinduism, they think the material world is just illusion anyway.
It's just a trap, right? I haven't read many Oriental philosophers, but I read Confucius, and Confucius is a very practical man. He does think the world is rational. He doesn't think that philosophical speculations are useful to the prince or to the people, and so he thinks that people should just abide by the rules, and everyone will get along better if they're virtuous. And I thought, considering the amount of damage that bad philosophy has done in the West, he might have a point. The Buddha's concern is much more personal, and I think enlightened. He's trying to find a way to free himself from the trap of life, which he regards as a snare and as a delusion. So inquire into what causes what the actual rules of the trap are. I don't think that's a primary concern of his, But there are many brands and flavors of Buddhism and many brands and flavors of Hinduism that I'm simply unaware of, unfamiliar with.
Yes, we shouldn't speculate too much, because we had neither of those things. So
no, you and I used to be atheists, and we kind of know how they think. But I was never a Buddhist, so I have no idea.
Exactly.
I'm still hoping to achieve enlightenment someday, but we'll see.
But that question of the universe being comprehensible, why can we make sense of the order of the universe? Why can we describe it mathematically? Why can we understand it? That's a peculiarly Western thing, and I would say a peculiarly Christian understanding of the world.
Well, it is.
I don't think you can get to that without. You maybe get to it from Judaism. But you won't. I don't think you can get to it outside of that Jewish and Christian tradition. So.
I will say the Greek philosophers did think the universe is rational. They thought they could reason about it and they could deduce things about it. They thought it was ordered and organized according to logos, according to mathematical principles and ratios.
Well, there you go.
They thought it was that way. Now, they never, as far as I know, the Greek philosophers never came up with a origin story for why it was that way. But I think that certain Stoic philosophers did, and Plato seemed to think that everything is derived from an archetype of the good, and the good also informs the archetypes of what is beautiful and true, and so on and so forth. Aristotle thought that we could see reasonable things in life, things that reacted according to understandable rational principles, and therefore we could deduce what the basic principle was. But that was a deduction that existed in our mind. It didn't necessarily exist outside of us in a realm of archetypes. That's a Platonic idea. But they both agree the universe is rational. But they didn't have an explanation for why it should be.
Wait. But take a step back.
Sure.
They would tend to try to deduce everything rationally. It was the Christians that tended to start doing experiments and trying to measure things in the real world, and not just do it via
armchair philosophy, we can call it.
Yeah, not just try to do it by armchair philosophy, which is why you have. Was it Da Vinci that dropped the 2 balls off the Leaning Tower of Pisa? So the story goes.
Galileo, thank you very much. It was
Galileo. Sorry, that's fine.
A good Catholic man.
But he like sort of do 2 balls of different masses fall at the same rate? Well,
incorrect. The different densities. It was different densities.
Okay, fine.
Of the same diameter. But Aristotle said otherwise, and Galileo was proving Aristotle wrong. And so he was one of the first people in a long time who said the ancients just have incorrect things in their manuscripts.
Yeah, well, no, but I mean, the point was Aristotle just sort of tried to reason about it and think about it, and Galileo went and got a couple of balls and dropped them off a tower and measured it.
Right.
That was the difference.
Right.
They tested the hypothesis,
he didn't really
as it were.
drop them off the tower. He didn't really drop them off the tower. That's a urban myth. He rolled them down a ramp, but he sang a canticle as he did so to time it. But here's a good question: Why did the Christians look at the world to try to find out what the reason behind the world is, when Aristotle did not? And he certainly did not. Aristotle did not count the number of teeth in the head of a man and a woman because he said they had a different number. just for instance, And he deduced that there was the elements were not divided into uncuttable particles or atoms. He believed in a plenum. But he didn't experiment to show it or anything like that. He just deduced it. But you're right. The Christians are the ones who organized scientific learning into a body. And why was that? Do you have a theory?
Well, the universe is orderly. God is orderly, and so was it? And
God made man in His
thoughts
image.
After him, but
God made man in His image according to the Jews and the Christians. So we also have His gift of reason. You say? So
we should, we should be able to think God's thoughts after Him. To quote, I forget who.
I think it was Stephen Hawking before Hawking turned atheist. The Christian answer is very neat and tidy, and that makes some atheists suspicious. But the Christian answer is that the same maker who made the universe, who made the math in the universe, made the math in our heads. And He arranged it so that they would equal each other. Yeah. Otherwise, what's the point of being alive? Otherwise, if you... Say again?
I was going to say, yeah,
didn't hear you.
exactly. No, I agree with you. They the two line up. So we should expect to be able to make sense of the universe because we're created in the image of God. I mean, I think that's a very reasonable starting point.
Right.
And I think the atheist has a problem there of why should the universe be comprehensible? It is. I mean, it just is. I'm not sure. It just is a very satisfying answer. It's another one of those brute facts, I suppose. But
well, let's be fair. Let's be fair to our friendly neighborhood atheist. He says that it's a given that logic is logic. Okay, he says the universe works because it has to work. If it didn't work, it wouldn't be a universe. Okay, the universe has to operate with certain rules that we can deduce, and the reason why we can deduce them is because we see them in action. That seems reasonable to me.
No, that doesn't.
Then
I don't think that
some
follows.
of them are. Go ahead.
I don't think that follows. No? I don't think it's obviously the case that the universe should be understandable at a deep level. I don't think that follows at all. Certainly not from was it Alvin Plantinga had a really interesting argument, an evolutionary argument against naturalism. And essentially the problem was there's no connection between if you think the mind evolved and evolution optimizes for survival, it doesn't follow logic. It doesn't follow from that our minds will be evolved to understand the universe. Like, that doesn't follow at all. All that follows is our minds will be evolved to pass our genes on. He had an amusing example of whenever you see a tiger, you run away from it. And evolution will select for that behavior, but evolution can't select for why you choose to run away from that lion. You might choose to run away from the lion because you're worried it will eat you, so you run away from it. But in theory, I mean, it's potentially just as likely when you see a lion, you think you want to be friends with it, and you want it to be friends with you, and the way you believe you become friends is to run away. It's a silly example, but the point is, evolution will select for both of those behaviors, just as like either of those behaviors is completely will increase your chance of survival because you're running away from the lion, but one of them is nonsense. But evolution can't tell the difference.
I agree.
So if your mind, if your mind is evolved, your mind has got the mind you use to understand the universe that evolved is going to be optimized for survival. But there's no reason that it doesn't follow that you should conclude, therefore, it will be optimized to understand the universe sensibly. I'm probably butchering Alvin's argument, but
no, Alvin's argument is very clear, because the according to the evolutionists, the evolutionary process is non-rational. It's a matter of natural selection, which means no one selects. It's not purposeful. Okay, it's just whatever happens to survive, you get more of. Okay, but that means if it was designed irrationally, if the faculty of reason arose irrationally, then it cannot be a tool meant for the purpose of correctly distinguishing logic from illogic. All it is a reflex making you run away from lions for whatever reason, a good reason or a bad reason. Okay, it doesn't judge between the reasons. So if reason has the power to distinguish logic from illogic, this is at best a happenstance or a happy accident. Okay. There's nothing about running away from lions that make you good at syllogism.
No, that's true. Well, Alvin Plantinga would note that the thing is, the set of completely crazy beliefs that will work is much, much, much larger than the set of sensible beliefs that will work. So it's much more likely that the set of beliefs the set of reasons the set of rationality you've been gifted with is nonsense, because the set of nonsense ones that will work, the set of nonsense ones are much, much larger. So just based on probability, it's much more likely to make no sense at all.
Right. Just based on probability, you can't tell whether your beliefs are true or false. You can only tell whether they work or don't work to survive. Now, let's throw atheist into the mix. Is atheism a belief that helps you survive? If it is not, the atheist, by his own lights, should abandon it.
Ironically, it's definitely... Well, I mean, it might make you survive better. You could argue either way. But atheists have low birth rates, so it's definitely not... It's definitely
So an irrational belief... If you
it's not
irrationally
evolutionary
believe
advantageous.
The evolutionary advantageous belief would be to regard contraception as a grave moral evil, to stick to one wife for life, to forbid divorce, and to have as many children as possible. Who does that sound like? Does that sound like a religious person, or does it sound like an atheist? So if the atheist is correct, that reason arose from non-reason, that it was not designed... If reason was not designed, it's not a tool, okay? If it's not designed to tell true from false, it's not designed to tell logic from illogic, it's not designed at all. It may happily, just by sheer coincidence, help us to survive, help our ancestors to survive in the Serengeti Plains in North Africa, where we no longer live, okay? So even the environment that created us no longer has the same pressures on us. Well, by that set of reasoning, reason can't be trusted because it wasn't designed for a purpose. The most you could say, if you were the atheist, is you could say, from a practical standpoint, my experience and the experience of history tells me that men can reason, they can come to useful conclusions, and that the plumbing works. Okay? If I do math, I can actually predict when there's going to be a lunar eclipse. I can actually sit there with my charts and the lunar eclipse will happen when I say it, when the math says so, without knowing why that's the case. But the whole problem is, our question is, why is that the case? Why should we believe that's the case? Aren't you putting us just so much faith in the nothing that happens for no reason? You can't explain that. That's a problem with your worldview. You can't explain why we should trust your reasoning. Just because it happened in the past doesn't mean it'll happen in the future, unless there's a law of nature. If there's no legislature, why is there a law of nature? If your reason occasionally is useful, but sometimes leads you astray, why trust it? You say, you don't have a reason to believe that the human reason exists for a purpose. In fact, if you're a Darwinian, you think it exists for no purpose. You think it by happenstance, helped your ancestors to survive. But since you're not living in the Serengeti Plains of North Africa, it may not help you survive, so you should abandon it.
Well,
right?
I was going to say...
it's not helping you. Who do you know who's run away from a tiger lately?
But they've come back
and
to
why
exactly
does
the same
math
problem
and
again.
why does syllogisms... Right, it's the problem of Piffle. If there's no God, logic itself is a piffle. It's a flim flam. It's falderall. It's nothing. It's balderdash. It doesn't exist for any reason. It doesn't have any meaning.
They seem to be coming back to the same problem over and over, which is they reach a point and go, oh, I don't know. We haven't got an answer to this. We haven't got an answer to this. We don't know why the universe exists. We don't know why reason works.
Right.
We don't, like just again and again they're coming back to we don't know why.
Right.
And
now let's be fair to our friendly neighborhood atheist. He then says, you don't know why either. You're just making up this belief in Santa Claus, this fairy tale of God, so you pretend you know an answer, but you don't know any more than I do, because you were not there when the universe was created. You don't know where the laws of nature come from. You just made up something, you see? So, I think a legitimate atheist, there are atheists who lie, but I think there's some that are legitimate. A legitimate atheist will say, I don't know why reason is reasonable. I don't know why reality is real. But you don't know either, is his accusation. Because he doesn't believe in our answer. He doesn't believe that there has to be an uncaused first cause. He doesn't believe there has to be a logic to logic, a logos, a word, so to speak. You see?
At some point, it's probably reasonable to conclude the person you're talking to is irrational then. And but I mean, the person you're talking to is, how do you politely say they're insane?
Here's how.
But in the literal sense of, they're just disconnected from reality. Like they're not grounded in reality at all. They're just completely disconnected from it. I mean, it's not intended as an insult, but I mean that seems to be that person seems to be insane. They're just, completely disconnected from reality. I don't know how to politely say that.
I do.
Go on.
The polite phrase is your beliefs are false to facts. The polite phrase is to say your model does not map reality. Your model does not predict nor map reality. There's no correspondence in the real world to the ideas in your head.
There you go.
And you can say that without any vitriol, In fact, as Christians, we're supposed to say love.
I wasn't saying you're insane with vitriol. It was more a lament, but
no.
It
is a lament. It's a lament.
I'm not happy they're insane. I just
no. Here's the problem. The person. Let's make a distinction. The person is sane, but his philosophy is insane. Insane means your thoughts don't correspond to reality. Your words don't reflect reality. You're not insane, but your philosophy is insane. That means your philosophy makes you say things and do things that don't make sense because they don't line up with the real world. Which is funny because that's the accusation they're always going to make to us, you see. But here, let's just talk about reality for a second. Atheists say that material reality is real, but they can't explain why it's so. You see? Because if you make the statement, only material reality is real, if that's true, then there's no knowledge except for empirical knowledge. But that statement is a metaphysical statement, not an empirical statement. You haven't checked all reality. You haven't actually seen and observed every piece of reality to say that it's all material. Nor can you, nor can anyone. You're making an argument from ignorance. You're saying, I choose to believe parts of reality I have not expected must be material and must be non-supernatural. There's no miracles. Well, have you seen all the non-miracles? It's a statement of faith. Right.
I've always found that conviction that there's definitely no miracles to be an odd one. I mean, I would have said the same thing once, but
sure.
I mean, I agree with you. Obviously, have you observed every? Well, no, but they would reply. Everyone I have investigated has turned out to be false, though in practice, they say
I wish that were the case because I never investigated a single one when I was an atheist.
No, of course.
Nor do I think they have.
No.
I don't think they've ever gone and examined the Shroud of Turin. I don't think they've ever examined the Tilma of Guadalupe. I don't think they've ever gone to Lourdes. I don't think they've ever even talked to me because I've seen miracles. Okay?
No, I agree. No,
but here's what's going on. Here's what's going on.
Yeah.
It's a metaphysical assertion. They're making a philosophical argument that there's no materialism, which they believe for philosophical reasons. But the problem is that the philosophy of materialism does not admit of metaphysical arguments. I once talked with a scientist, and this is actually a legitimate, honest-to-goodness, a credentialed scientist who's done Einsteinian physics as a guy. I used some of his ideas in one of my science fiction books. I like the guy. But he said there's no such thing as metaphysics. I said, that's a metaphysical statement. That's a metaphysical argument. And he stopped talking to me.
Well, I mean, what choice does he have? You're obviously correct. So, yes, like...
What he said was, you pretend you know more about science than I do, when I said that.
No?
He thought it was a scientific fact that there's no such thing as philosophy. And I asked him what experiment could prove it, and he didn't answer the question. He made fun of me instead. So, there we go.
You can't do science without metaphysics. You can't even get to the starting line without the universe's... you can't do science without assumptions like the universe makes sense. The universe is regular. The universe not only is regular but is comprehensible, and the universe, our minds are capable of comprehending that. And you can't even get to the starting line to do science.
Right, because that is the starting line.
Literally metaphysical assumptions.
Those are three metaphysical assumptions about the nature of reason and the nature of cause and effect. Right.
Yep.
Right.
And you can't.
And
you can't do,
the
you
most
can't, you can't even
fundamental
do science without them.
The most fundamental one. The most fundamental one, the one you started with, is nothing comes from nothing. Nothing happens for no reason. Okay. Do you remember how we started this whole conversation? By talking about people who think the universe arises for no reason? Or that there's no reason for why there's laws of nature, or there's no reason for why the human mind has the faculty of reason? You know. And it just goes on and on.
Well,
and it gets to the point where you go, well, why do words have meaning? Now, if you don't believe in the supernatural, where do words live if they come from the world of change and decay? Did they not exist before mankind and they won't exist afterwards? Are ideas just in our head? Or do they have some sort of eternity to them? Because we often refer to concepts that are not particular to a given time and place. If I talk about even a triangle, I can deduce certain properties of that triangle that are always true for every man everywhere. That's not something I get from my senses. It's eternal. Okay? So how do we know any of this? If you believe in science, you have to believe in at least 3 metaphysical assumptions or propositions without which science cannot take place. Now, you can't know those through science, but you do know them. No. Otherwise, you can't do science. So how do we know we know? Well, where does knowledge come from? How can we explain any objective knowledge of any kind that's non-physical? How can we explain twice 2 is 4? That's not a physical thing. There are physical things that can be described by saying 2 apples and 2 apples is 4 apples. Sure. But the thing itself is non-physical.
I would not. Well, hang on. I would note you could do science just by asserting that these are brute facts. I don't think it's a very satisfying answer.
What? That twice 2 is 4 is a brute fact? Show it to me. What color is it?
No. Well, no. The starting assumptions of science that you can't do science without. You could just assert those are brute facts, and you could do science just fine.
No. I think you're mistaken. You could assert that they was a game, and you have to agree to the rules of the game arbitrarily. But you can't call them brute facts because it's not something you can see with your eyes. I can't see the fact that there's laws of nature. I cannot see the fact that there's regularity in nature. I can see regular objects occurring and disappearing. You see the difference? I can see the operation of laws of nature. I can't see the laws. I can't see the lawgiver.
You're saying it's not reasonable to make that inductive leap.
Correct. I'm saying it's not reasonable unless you believe that induction allows you to deduce non-physical reality.
Yep, I'd agree with that.
But you're also correct. If the atheist says, I don't know for sure the laws of nature will persist, but they've persisted so far, so at a practical level I'll simply act as if they did. And I'll run away from a tiger, because that seems to increase my survival chances. You see, the atheist can try to retreat from all these metaphysical or philosophical speculations, but he then has to give up so much. He's got to give up having a model of the universe at all, eventually. Because his model is then based on what?
Oh, I agree.
Practical experience, which is based on what? You see? And like I said, after a certain point, words don't have meaning unless universals have meaning. A universal is something, there's no such thing as apple. There are specific organisms that you and I call apples, that in China they use the Chinese word for it, you know. And in Latin, I believe the word also includes other types of fruit, which we would not include. But the thing itself, the concept, is not physical. So, as an atheist, you have a hard trouble. An atheist doesn't just not believe in God. He also has trouble explaining why he believes in anything other than physical nature. Now, agreed. You and I said at the beginning, there's some atheists who are not strict materialists. There's some atheists who are dualists. But then they have to at least believe in something like Aristotle's rationality or Plato's archetypes or something.
You're going to be stuck with forms, and you're going to be stuck with something like Aristotle's causation. And as Thomas Aquinas showed, that's a problem. Well,
and that is a problem because
that's
Aristotle
a problem if you want to be an atheist.
Aristotle also believed in an unmoved mover, a first cause of the universe. You say, from which goodness came.
And
even
Thomas
in Aristotle,
Aquinas went to town with that.
I'm sorry, say again?
I was going to say yes.
So,
yeah, go on.
I can't hear you. You're cutting out. Say it again, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say, and Thomas Aquinas took what
Right.
Aristotle came up with, went to town with it, and
It's hard. It's hard to.
You're stuck.
Right, you're
with
stuck.
the existence of God.
And here's the other thing: we haven't even gotten to the main meat of the question, which is, dear Mr. Atheist, why is there goodness? Are you telling the truth when you say you're an atheist? And if so, why tell the truth? Do you believe it is morally good to tell the truth when you tell me these things? You know, where does your virtue come from? Where does your purpose of life come from? Why are you happy rather than unhappy? Why not kill children for money, Mr. Atheist? You know?
That's an awkward question because most atheists you meet are fervently pro-abortion, so they're pretty much fine with killing children for money.
Right, right.
So, you know.
That's a good reason not to be an atheist, even if you have perfectly fine philosophical reasons for it. You know?
I mean,
now,
I like.
Here's
like,
one other
I
question.
understand there
are
are atheists that are pro-life, and that's fine, but
they can't give a reason for it.
No, I agree.
I like it
problem.
that atheists are pro-life. I used to be a pro-life
Yep.
atheist back when I was an atheist. But my rationale was rather elaborate, and it did not necessarily follow, you see. Now, here's the final question, which I think is actually the killer question. It's almost never asked. Why is there beauty? It doesn't help you run away from tigers. In fact, tigers are quite handsome. You might run toward a tiger. Why do we have that concept in our minds? Where does that come from? Animals don't seem to have that concept, as best we can tell. You know?
There's some. I do remember. Might have been Peter Kreeft was talking about it in one of his lectures. Monkeys might have some aesthetic sense to some degree, some appreciation for beauty, maybe. Probably not the way we do, but.
So far, no one has experimentally shown that an animal is attracted to poetry or music or anything else.
Oh no! Well, I mean, do you remember? We were talking about humor in an earlier
Yes.
and an earlier show, and yeah, humans have a very sophisticated sense of humor. But I've
Not
met
me,
dogs.
but other humans do. Yeah.
But my dog Annie will sneeze on you, and she clearly thinks that's absolutely hilarious.
Sure.
I've met another dog that was completely black, and his favorite game was to sneak up on you when it was dark out in the driveway and touch you with his nose. And then they say dogs don't smile, but every dog I've ever met knows how to smile. They definitely know how to express sort of joy and happiness. And he thought that was the best, most hilarious game ever, to sneak up to people and poke them. Like, they have senses of humor.
You're talking about prankishness.
It's a small child's sense of humor. Sorry?
It's prankishness. It's deviltry. It's amusing malice. It's not beauty. It's not an aesthetic sense.
No, but I meant like.
And it's not a play on words.
No, but they have a very small child's sense of humor in a sense.
Yeah, you can think things are funny. The animals can enjoy things. Sure, you can think things are funny.
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh no, I mean, so they have some animals seem to have very rudimentary versions of what humans have.
Sure, I would even say they have a rudimentary conscience. A dog can tell the difference between good dog and bad dog.
Oh yeah.
Sure. Why not? But what they don't have is reason. What they don't have is aesthetics.
No, I agree.
No animal has ever been known to stare at the stars in awe. No animal prays, as far as we know. As far as we can tell.
Well, as far as we can tell, they don't pray. My dogs will watch thunderstorms. They seem to like them. I don't know why. But I don't have access to.
Yeah, we can't speak
their
dog,
consciousness.
so we don't know.
I can't sit there and understand that they're appreciating the awe of the storm, but they seem to have some sort of sense of some sort of appreciation for it. So, no, I don't know. I mean, I could just be anthropomorphizing. They might just like the loud banging noises, but.
But then again, I've never taken a dog into a modern art museum and had him appreciate the paintings there because I can't either. As far as I can tell, modern art is actually just garbage. So
I was
maybe
gonna
maybe
say,
I don't have an aesthetic sense either, so it's hard to say.
I'm pretty sure a dog actually would appreciate a modern art museum in the appropriate fashion by urinating
Yes,
on the art.
Yes, Marcus territory. Correct. I think you're right about that. I think you're right about that. So let's not mock dogs or.
No.
So there's some really basic problems with being an atheist, and I'm not talking about social problems. I'm not talking about how do you run a society if people's oaths cannot be trusted. I'm talking about your model, your scientific model of the universe, the picture in your head of what's going on around you outside does not match up well enough to be serviceable. No atheist will ever admit this, and I did not admit it back when I was an atheist, but you're usually relying on, if you're an atheist in the Far East, you're going to be a Confucian, whether you know it or not. If you're an atheist in India, you're going to be a Buddhist or a Hindu, whether you know it or not. If you're an atheist in the West, you're going to make Christian assumptions about the rationality of the universe, about the goodness of goodness, about the usefulness of the human mind, and things like that. And you're just basically playing along with the society around you.
Well,
and you don't happen to believe in the thing that the society believes in at the bedrock of all its other beliefs. You just don't recognize, as an atheist, where all this other stuff comes from. Nature, I hate to say it, atheist, comes from the supernatural. There's no other place for it to come from.
Well, I mean, atheist morality, when you sort of drill down to it, I'm sure there may be an atheist listening who will take exception to this, but as a general rule of thumb, from what I have seen, most atheist morality, where it is well thought out, comes down to, let's basically borrow Christian morality, but let's have sex with whoever we like.
I think you're right.
I mean, that's I mean, they'll go on from there and they'll try to make it coherent and it will all unravel.
I used to be an atheist, and I've spoken to many atheists, and I've never seen even a single one of them stick up for chastity, stick up for monogamy, or anything like that. What they will do is they'll say, since there's no God, since the rules of monogamy are based on God, let's ignore them, and we'll have a lot more fun if we just all sleep around. Well, we in the West have done that experiment, and the answer is in. You're wrong.
Yeah. It's immiserating and awful and destructive, and you have to have a very, very short time preference to think this is preferable.
And because it makes it meaningless. It turns life into piffle, which is what. So I think we've completely come full circle in the answer to the question.
Well, it seems like an unlivably sad existence. I mean, I know that you ask this question of atheists and they always get annoyed, particularly the ones that used to be Christians or used to be... I say used to be Christians because they'll say they used to be Christians, but they've got this weird, extremely strict, rules-based Christianity that sort of misses the point entirely. And they've rejected that, but I don't know. I never recognized the God they're rejecting. Maybe that's just me.
That's the way I was when I was an atheist too. The God I was arguing against was some sort of Santa Claus version of a completely irrational being. That's not what any Christian ever talks about. I was rejecting a cosmic tyrant, and it's the same thing. It's the same tyrant that Christopher Hitchens was in rebellion against. The reason why I brought up beauty and I emphasized it is that Christopher Hitchens' brother fell back into Christianity because he went into a museum and saw a beautiful picture, and he saw the sunlight shining on it, and he said, "There's got to be more to life than this. Beauty has a reason." The reason why beauty is the reason why modern art is so ugly is because beauty is the great unspoken argument in favor of God. It's not something you can put into words. Either you see it or you don't. You know. And beauty convinces someone at a deep level in his heart that life is not piffle. Life is not meaningless. Love also convinces everyone that life is not meaningless. And that's what the atheist has to argue against.
But they tend to deconstruct those things.
Yes.
Atheists in practice tend to say things like, such and such is just, like love is just hormones and oxytocin bonding you together.
Correct. He turns it.
Beauty is just. It's just. Yeah.
Correct. He turns everything into piffle. He turns it into nothingness.
Well,
he turns it into balderdash and to falderall. He says everything's an illusion. I would be better off. He would be better off if he were a Buddhist and said it's all illusion. I want to flee everything and become enlightened and go to nirvana. That would make more sense. Because does he say that of himself? If everything is just atoms colliding together, then so is your belief in atheism. If love isn't real, so philosophy isn't real. Philosophy isn't real. The atheist philosophy isn't real. You see the problem? They're sawing off the branch they're sitting on.
I think once you start to go down this rabbit hole, you have to keep throwing things out and abandoning things, and you'll eventually reach the point like you'll have to give up love and mind and ethics and reason
and free will
and beauty but I mean you'll eventually get so far down the rabbit hole you'll be giving up composite objects, and you'll just be stuck with maybe individual atoms that sort of group together a bit is all reality is.
I met a woman who believed that she herself did not exist. She said that the words I and me have no reference in reality. That it was merely an illusion that she existed. Now, she wasn't a Buddhist. I would have respected her if she had been a Buddhist. She thought that abstract concepts didn't exist.
But I think once you go down that rabbit hole, that's inevitably where you will end up. I don't think you can end up anywhere else. The only reason you'll end up somewhere else is you don't follow... You stop following the chain of reasoning to its logical conclusion.
Yes, exactly. I
mean, you'll have gone beyond reason and logic at that point, but...
Right.
But...
No, but I think you're right.
I don't know how you escape it.
There are atheists who are still decent and normal people. That's only because they haven't gone down the rabbit hole far enough. They haven't seen where their ideas lead. Their ideas lead to nothingness. Their ideas lead to the abyss, to nihilism.
It's just a nihilistic hole. I'm not sure, you can't get out of the hole either once you get into it.
Right.
Once you go down the rabbit hole, you'll end up, everything will dissolve into nothing, and you'll be stuck. There'll be nowhere else to go.
Right.
So, I don't know.
So avoid it, kids. Knowing is half the battle.
Knowing's half the battle, and the other half is lasers. So
yeah, the other half is lasers.
But what I don't know how you avoid this as an atheist if you're going to take it seriously. It's totally unlivable, but
right.
It was like when we looked at poor Rocky Valentine in A Nice Place to Visit, and Aquinas' understanding of what makes a life worth living, and maybe you can make this livable because your life is finite, and I would say that in times past, in like 20 years ago, 40 years ago, you could be an atheist living in America and kind of coast along on your unquestioned assumptions that supported the idea that the universe was rational and that there was such a thing as objective good. But the modern atheists reject all objectivity. They reject the idea of objective good. They only believe in power for power's sake. They believe all human interactions, including love between man and woman, is a power struggle between the weak and strong. They don't think words have meaning, and so none of them mean a single word. By their own admission, none of them mean a single word coming out of their mouths. Okay? Now, that's not all atheists, but I'm saying that's the modern mainstream kind of political death cult that has taken over our civilization. And it all comes from they went down the rabbit hole. They rejected God, and now they're rejecting reason. Now they're rejecting good and evil. Now they're rejecting beautiful and ugly. They're rejecting everything but power. And it's not going to satisfy them. They're going to go crazy. They're going to start dressing up like women and shooting people in schools and doing other bizarre things that no one can understand. Because you can believe a crazy philosophy for a little bit if the people around you are not crazy. But once you're in the majority, you actually do go crazy. You actually lose the ability. Once you've all gone mad?
you go mad. Societies can go mad. They suffer bouts of madness. So.
Well, yes. So, how do you avoid this rabbit hole?
There's two ways to do it. One is to cleave to God with all your heart, strength, and love, and the other is to, when someone asks you a question, try to answer it as reasonably as possible. And if your answer is not satisfactory, if your answer is I don't know, no one knows, you kind of gotta go, well, wait a minute. If I don't know, how did I get to this situation where I say I don't know whether or not what reality is real? I don't know whether or not words have meaning. I don't know whether or not the universe comes from somewhere. I don't know whether or not there's a cause and effect. I don't know whether or not there's free will. I don't know when did I choose to stop believing in free will? I mean, if you are an atheist, then you're supposed to be a great believer in human reason. Okay, you're supposed to be a Vulcan. But if you're a Vulcan, then you can't reason yourself into a rabbit hole where there's no answers to anything. Then you can't use logic to prove that logic is illogical. That's illogical. You see? So you either have to have faith in God, or you have to pull yourself out of the rabbit hole one step at a time by rejecting any premise that defeats itself. You have to reject any philosophy that destroys philosophy. And all modern leftist philosophies do. They're all nihilistic. They're all deconstructions. They're all.
Aren't you eventually going to come back to God, though?
Yes, you have to. You can't escape him because he's a living thing. He's after you. He's coming for you. That's what I didn't know when I was an atheist. God is the hunter, and we're the rabbits. We're not the masters of the universe. Okay, sorry, gang.
I'm always reminded of that. What is it? That poem, "Footprints in the Sand." That's not what it's called, but and it talks about how you're walking with Jesus, and sometimes there's two sets of footprints, and sometimes there's one, and the person is going, "Is this where you abandoned me?" And goes, "No, this is where I carried you." And I always think, I'm sure in my case, there's large sections where there's like claw marks in the sand, dragging along with Jesus, dragging me along by my feet, and I don't want to go, but you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, I guess we come back to where we always come back to. You'll need to repent on your knees in sackcloth and ashes and turn back to God if you want to escape the nihilistic black hole that trying to reject that will eventually lead to.
Yep. Because evolution also supports religion. We're outbreeding you, so change to our side. Because if nothing means anything, why be an atheist if it doesn't make any difference? And if it does make a difference, then you have to believe in a world where things make a difference, okay? And that leads you back to us, whether you believe it or not.
So, on that note, I think that's a good place to end. If you've enjoyed the show, like, share, and subscribe. Check out our Substack, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks for joining me, John.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me.